There comes a moment quiet, unannounced, when you look at your own life the way you might study a reflection in a window at night. You see your face, but behind it, you see the world too. And you wonder which one you've been paying attention to all these years. You've spent so much of your life in motion, haven't you? Not because you were certain, but because you were afraid to stop. Afraid of what you might hear if the world suddenly went silent. Afraid of what you might discover if you finally asked yourself why you doubt your own steps, your own worth, your own voice. And so you learned to smile when you felt uncertain, to keep walking when your feet were tired, to keep giving even when no one seemed to offer anything in return. You learned to hold yourself together, like a house built on thin, trembling wood, hoping no one would notice the quiet cracks under the surface. But beneath all of this, something else has been waiting, a kind of intelligence you didn't know you possessed, a deeper rhythm you never learned to trust. You've been taught to question everything: your instincts, your timing, your desires, as though your life were some fragile machine that might break if handled without doubt. But what if doubt was the thing breaking you? What if, all along, life wasn't testing you, but trying to help you? What if the universe has been whispering, nudging, guiding you toward paths you refused to walk because you believed you weren't ready, or worthy, or capable? And what if the truth is painfully simple? Life begins to open only when you stop standing in your own way, when you stop treating your own intuition like a stranger, when you stop apologizing for being who you are. So here you are, right at the edge of something subtle, something tender, something quietly revolutionary. The possibility that life has always been on your side, and the only barrier left is the one you keep rebuilding inside yourself. Most people move through life as though they're half awake, drifting through days that look full on the outside but feel strangely hollow on the inside. And if you look closely, or really closely, you'll notice how deeply the illusion runs. You see it in the way people talk at social gatherings. Their voices bright, but their eyes tired, smiling because it's expected, nodding because it's easier than being honest. You see it in offices where everyone pretends to be busy, stacking hours like bricks, hoping the weight of their effort will someday feel meaningful. You see it in families, sitting together at dinner, each person lost behind a glowing screen, close in distance but far in presence. You see it in yourself too, in the little ways you shrink, the quiet moments you hide what you really feel, the times you choose silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you assume no one will understand. This is the everyday illusion, the performance of being alive without the experience of truly living. The illusion whispers that you must keep up, fit in, stay small, behave, follow the unspoken rules, and without realizing it, you begin to doubt the one thing that could set you free, your own inner knowing. You walk into rooms, scanning faces for permission. You make decisions based on fear of disapproval rather than desire for truth. You let the noise around you drown out the quiet intelligence within you, and slowly, very slowly, you forget who you are beneath all the layers you've learned to wear. You tell yourself you need more clarity, more signs, more certainty before you act. But deep down you know the truth. You've ignored clarity 1,000 times. You've felt the pull towards something different, something real, something that feels like you. And you've brushed it aside because doubt told you to. Doubt became the lens through which you see the world. Doubt became the language you used to speak to yourself. Doubt became the invisible rope tied around your potential, gently pulling you back every time you take a step forward. And yet, there is something inside you that refuses to die. A quiet, persistent awareness that sees through the illusion even when you pretend not to. It notices the way your heart reacts before your mind has time to interfere. It recognizes the opportunities that feel suspiciously right. It senses the subtle alignments that appear when you stop resisting. It knows that life begins to cooperate the moment you stop doubting yourself, not because the world changes, but because you finally stop distorting what was always clear. This part of you is awake, even if you are still rubbing your eyes. It's waiting for you to notice that the illusion only has power when you participate in it. When you stop trying to impress the world stops intimidating you. When you stop hiding, life stops withholding. When you stop doubting, life starts helping. And maybe, just maybe, the illusion was never the problem. The problem was believing it was real. There is a moment, quiet, almost fragile, when something inside you begins to shift. It rarely arrives with fireworks or grand announcements. Instead, it appears in the smallest cracks of your ordinary life. Like light slipping through a door you didn't realize had been open all along. Maybe it happens when you hear someone say aloud the truth you've been afraid to admit. Maybe it comes in a moment of exhaustion, when you're too tired to perform, too drained to pretend, and you let yourself exist without the mask for the first time in years. Or maybe it's something even simpler, a breath, a stillness, a pause between thoughts where you suddenly sense that the world is not against you and you are not against yourself. This is the awakening, not the dramatic kind people romanticize, but the subtle realization that you've been living inside a story, and the story was never yours. You begin to notice how many of your decisions were born not from desire but from fear. How often you walked away from what you wanted simply because doubt whispered, "Not you, not yet." You watch the way your mind narrates your life, predicting failure before you begin, apologizing for your existence before anyone has asked. And the more you see it, the harder it becomes to unsee. Awakening is unsettling because it asks you to question everything you once accepted. It pulls you away from the familiar warmth of your limitations. It invites you to step into a wider, more honest space, one where you can no longer pretend you're powerless. Suddenly, you recognize the moments when life tried to help you, the opportunities you labeled coincidence, the people who appeared at the right time, the strange synchronicities you dismissed as luck. You begin to feel a quiet intelligence moving beneath the surface of your experiences, guiding you even when you didn't trust it. And with this realization comes both liberation and fear. Because once you awaken, you can no longer hide behind the comfort of doubt. You can no longer pretend you don't know what you want, and you can no longer ignore the subtle truth rising within you. Life responds to your courage, not your hesitation. When you step toward what feels right, the world shifts to meet you. But this understanding also comes with a cost, and that cost is the illusion of safety. Awakening is beautiful, yes, but it is also profoundly lonely, because the moment you begin seeing clearly, you realize how many people are still living behind the fog you spent years trapped in. And suddenly, the conversations you once tolerated feel strangely empty. The roles you used to play feel too small. The rooms that once felt familiar now feel like places where you can no longer breathe. It's as if you've stepped outside of a crowded theater in the middle of the performance. And as you turn back to look through the doorway, you see everyone still absorbed in the script lines memorized, expressions rehearsed, unaware that the story is not real. This isolation isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It shows up in moments when you try to share what you've realized but your words fall flat, landing on ears tuned to a different frequency. It shows up when you watch someone repeat the same self-sabotage you once knew intimately, and you want to help them, but you know they're not ready. It shows up when you notice the subtle cruelty in conversations, the small betrayals people accept as normal, the deep exhaustion hidden behind forced laughter, and you feel the weight of seeing too much. You begin to understand why people stay asleep. It's easier, it's softer, it's full of warm, familiar illusions. But once you've awakened, you can't go back, not even when you want to. The truth has a way of making the world quieter, slower, heavier. You sense things before they're said. You notice shifts in people's energy, like changes in weather. You see the insecurity behind arrogance, the fear behind anger, the hunger behind it, and instead of feeling superior, you feel compassion. And a hint of sorrow. There's a story, simple but universal. A woman begins to see the truth of her life, that she has been shrinking for years, nodding along to expectations that never felt like her own. One day, after a long silence, she finally speaks her truth to the people closest to her. Not rudely, not loudly, just honestly. And instead of being met with understanding, she is met with confusion, resistance, even subtle resentment. They liked her better when she doubted herself. They felt safer when she stayed small. Her awakening disrupted the ecosystem of their comfort. So she learns the first great loneliness of awareness. Not everyone wants you to grow. And maybe you know that loneliness too. That feeling of seeing farther than the people around you, of hearing the underlying meaning behind people's words, of sensing what others refuse to acknowledge. You begin to inhabit a different emotional landscape, one where certainty feels dangerous and honesty feels heavy. You want to connect, but connection now requires depth that many are afraid to enter. You want to be understood, but understanding demands vulnerability most people avoid. This isolation is not a punishment, it's a passage, a necessary distance between the self you used to be and the self you are becoming. But it sets the stage for the next challenge, the one that determines whether your awakening strengthens you or breaks you. With awareness comes confrontation, not with others, but with yourself. You begin to stand at a crossroads that feels both empowering and terrifying. The choice between speaking your truth or remaining silent, between stepping into your growth or shrinking back into comfort. And neither option feels simple anymore. When you looked at life through doubt, decisions were easier in a strange way. You always chose the safer side, the predictable path, the version of yourself that kept the peace even when it cost you your authenticity. But now, you can't escape the truth you've seen. You can't unfeel the intuition that rises in your chest. You can't unknow what life has quietly revealed to you. So the conflict begins. You question whether you should protect others from the truth you carry or protect yourself from the consequences of revealing it. You wonder if your silence is compassion or fear. You wonder if your honesty would liberate you or isolate you further. You watch yourself hesitate before speaking a boundary. You feel your heart tighten when you're about to decline something that drains you. You sense the tremor inside you when you're tempted to go back to your old habits just to make someone else comfortable. There is a part of you still loyal to your past self, the one who doubted everything, who apologized for existing, who played small so others wouldn't feel insecure. But there is another part of you now, a quieter, steadier, more grounded presence. It asks you to trust what you feel. It asks you to honor what you've learned. It asks you to choose what aligns with who you're becoming, not who you were. And this creates a tension so deep it almost feels physical, like being pulled between two worlds, the familiar world of doubt and the emerging world of clarity. The conflict shows up in relationships too. You notice when someone dismisses your growth, when they subtly try to pull you back into old patterns. When they respond to your boundaries with confusion or irritation, you feel torn between wanting to stay connected and wanting to stay true to yourself. And you realize, with a bittersweet ache, that choosing yourself sometimes means disappointing others. This internal battle is not a sign of weakness. It is the sign that you are changing. Real transformation demands discomfort. It requires you to let go of the version of yourself that made everyone else comfortable and step into the version that finally feels like you. But carrying this conflict alone has consequences. And if it grows unchecked, it leads to something heavier. Something you may have felt before: the quiet collapse that comes from holding too much. There comes a point when the weight of awareness becomes too heavy to carry neatly. Not because you're weak, but because you've been holding far more than any one person was ever meant to hold. You start to feel everything: the unspoken tensions in conversations, the emotional undercurrents beneath people's words, the subtle fractures in relationships, the inner battles others pretend not to have. And somewhere along the way, without noticing it, you begin absorbing it all. You carry it the way someone might carry stones in their pockets, small at first, barely noticeable, but accumulating until you realize you're sinking under the weight. This is the collapse. The quiet unraveling that happens when awareness outpaces acceptance. You become overstimulated by truths you can't unsee. You feel drained by interactions that once felt effortless. The world becomes louder, harsher, more demanding, and you begin to confuse empathy with responsibility, intuition with burden, awakening with obligation. You start believing it's your job to hold everything together, to fix what's broken, to soothe what's hurting, to keep the peace even when it costs you your own inner balance. Your mind becomes a crowded room where every voice is loud, every doubt amplified, every emotion magnified. You begin second-guessing yourself, not because you don't know the truth, but because you feel overwhelmed by how much truth there is. Your clarity becomes a double-edged sword, sharp enough to free you, sharp enough to cut you. And slowly, the lines blur. Where you end, where others begin. What's your responsibility? What isn't? You may notice yourself withdrawing, not out of disinterest, but out of exhaustion. You may find your motivation slipping, your creativity dimming, your sense of direction fading. Life feels like walking through water, heavy, resistant, slow. You start questioning whether awareness was a blessing or a curse, whether seeing deeply is worth the emotional cost, whether understanding people so intimately is a gift or a quiet form of heartbreak. And in this state, doubt tries to return. It whispers again. You see too much. You feel too much. You're not built for this. But something inside you knows that the collapse is not a failure. It is a necessary breaking, a shedding of everything you can no longer carry. It is the body saying, enough. It's time to release what isn't yours. It is the soul saying, you cannot ascend while holding the weight of the world. The collapse is not the end. It is the doorway to revelation if you dare to walk through it. Eventually, something begins to change, not through force, not through effort, but through exhaustion. You reach a point where you are simply too tired to keep carrying what was never yours. And in that rare, unguarded moment, clarity enters, not with a shout, but with a gentle, almost compassionate whisper. It tells you a truth you have spent years circling without ever fully accepting. You were never meant to hold everything. You were never meant to fix every imbalance, soothe every discomfort, anticipate every emotion around you. Your awareness was a gift, yes, but not a contract, not a cage, not a lifelong assignment to carry burdens that were never designed for your shoulders. This is the revelation, the moment you realize that life has been trying to help you all along, and you kept interrupting the process. You mistook overthinking for intelligence. You mistook self-sacrifice for love. You mistook hyper-awareness for responsibility. You mistook carrying others for caring for them. And the universe, patient and simply waited for you to understand that the assistance you were seeking was not something you earn. It's something you allow. You begin to see what your collapse was actually teaching you. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are filters to keep your soul intact. You learn that you can care without absorbing, observe without inheriting, love without losing yourself. You start recognizing when your energy is being drained, and you adjust instead of enduring. You begin to trust the natural intelligence of life, the way it arranges, redirects, removes, and replenishes without needing your constant intervention. And something remarkable happens when you stop trying to manage everything. Life steps in. Things begin aligning with surprising ease. Opportunities feel less like battles and more like invitations. People who match your growth begin appearing, while those who depended on your self-doubt quietly drift away. You move differently, calmer, clearer, less entangled. You stop questioning your instincts because you finally see how often they were right. You stop criticizing yourself because you understand that self-doubt was never humility, it was self-abandonment. Your relationships change too. You stop over-explaining, over-giving. You speak more simply, more honestly. You no longer apologize for your needs, your pace, your truth. And surprisingly, life responds with softness. You find yourself surrounded by people who don't require your shrinking to feel comfortable. You start to feel supported without performing, valued without proving, seen without shrinking. For the first time, you feel the quiet dignity of standing in your own presence, without fear, and the greatest revelation is this. You don't need to fight life. You don't need to manipulate outcomes. You don't need to earn your place in the world by doubting your worth. When you stop resisting, the path becomes clearer. When you stop overthinking, intuition becomes louder. When you stop doubting, life starts helping. Not because the universe suddenly favors you, but because you finally stopped blocking what was always meant for you. You discover that the world is not your opponent. It is your mirror. And when you trust yourself, the mirror begins to reflect a life that trusts you back. And now, finally, you arrive at a quieter place, the part of the journey where everything you've learned begins to settle into your bones. Integration is not dramatic. It's not a declaration or a transformation you announce to the world. It is something softer, a shift in the way you carry yourself, the way you breathe, the way you move through your days. You begin to notice that life feels different not because the world has changed, but because your relationship to yourself has changed. Where doubt once dictated your choices, a calm, inner steadiness takes its place. Where fear once clouded your intuition, clarity now rises like morning light. Where self-judgment once held you hostage, compassion now loosens your grip. Integration is the quiet understanding that you no longer need to be at war with yourself. You don't need to convince the world of your worth because you finally feel it from within. You stop treating life like a test you can fail. You begin to trust the timing of things not because everything is predictable, but because you no longer collapse at the first sign of uncertainty. Instead, you breathe, you observe, you allow. And something beautiful happens when you begin to embody this new way of being. Life becomes cooperative. Situations soften. Opportunities feel aligned rather than forced. Your relationships become clearer, some deepen, some dissolve, all finding their rightful place. You no longer cling to what isn't meant for you, and you no longer chase what doesn't resonate. You understand that what is meant to stay will stand beside you. Without needing to be held so tightly, you also begin to understand the paradox from the very beginning, the one you've been circling around since your first breath of awareness. Life starts helping you the moment you stop doubting yourself. Because doubt was the fog that blurred your path, the barrier that muted your intuition, the weight that kept you from rising. Without it, you move differently. You decide differently. You trust differently. You live differently. Integration is not the end. It is the beginning of a new rhythm, a life lived from self-trust rather than self-doubt, from presence rather than fear, from authenticity rather than performance. You discover that you don't need to chase meaning. You create it. You don't need to control life. You collaborate with it. You don't need to prove who you are. You embody it. And as this understanding settles into your heart, you realize something simple, yet profoundly freeing. You were never lost. You were only learning to return to yourself. And now, you have